Elements of the short story, an introduction to key literary terms. Short stories are, by definition, a type of fictional prose. They are almost always focused on one major conflict which drives the story's plot. While the length of short stories can vary, Edgar Allan Poe defined them as short enough that they can be read in one sitting. While most short stories may be read in an hour or two, some may require substantially more time depending on the reader's ability and vocabulary. Although short stories can be found as far back as the Canterbury Tales in the 14th century, the short story emerged as a popular genre in the early 1800s. It was influenced by the rise of commercial publication and emerging magazines during this time period. Many of the early short story writers were published in magazines of the day. This genre first became popular in the United States and later spread to the rest of the world. Among the earliest American writers of short stories were Washington Irving, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Edgar Allan Poe. The main character in a literary work is the protagonist, and his or her adversary or enemy, if there is one, is the antagonist. Most plots center upon a conflict, or multiple conflicts. The protagonists are set against other people or society, against fate, circumstance, or the environment, or against their own desires or values, or any combination of these. Point of view is the perspective from which a narrative is presented. It is analogous to the point from which the camera sees the action in a film. The two main points of view are third-person narrator, who stands outside the story itself. This narrator will use third-person pronouns such as he, she, or they. And the first-person narrator, who participates in the story. This narrator will use first-person, I. The all-knowing third-person narrator, omniscient, may choose to guide the reader's understanding of characters and the significance of their story. This type of narrator may be intrusive, commenting and evaluating, or unobtrusive, describing without much commentary. The first-person narrator is a character within the story and therefore limited in understanding. He or she might be an observer who happens to see the events of the story, such as in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Or they may play a minor role in the action, such as in Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Or they might be the protagonist, which we will see in many short stories, including Tony Cade Bambara's The Lesson. We can better understand how a story is put together to create its desired effect if we separate plot and structure. Generally, the plot of a story is what happens. Stories are mostly comprised of actions or incidents that occur in the order in which they happen. This sequential or narrative order is plot, what governs the development of the action. In well-plotted stories, however, events do not occur because of time passing, but rather, and more importantly, because effects follow causes. In a good short story, nothing is accidental or unimportant. Everything is related and deliberate. What gets the plot moving? Conflict. Conflict is the controlling impulse in a connected pattern of causes and effects. A conflict is what a character, usually the protagonist, has to face or overcome. Sometimes this is the antagonist. The conflict or opposition in a story brings out all types of human energy and can show itself in many ways. Often there is uncertainty until a conflict is resolved. Uncertainty creates doubt, which creates tension and thus interest. There are 4 generally recognized conflicts: man versus man versus himself, man versus society, and man versus nature. Structure is plot formalized, and it contains 5 distinct parts. The exposition. This is where the background information is given within the story about characters, settings, initial situations, etc. These details often occur towards the beginning of a story, but they can occur anywhere where we get new information. The complication is the onset of the major conflict, and then those events that advance the plot, that create tension or conflict. The crisis is that point where everything that follows is different from everything that had preceded it, like a turning point. Usually a decision or action undertaken to resolve the conflict. The climax is the point of highest tension where the story has been heading. It usually occurs 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through. It could be an action, but also a decision or realization, such as an epiphany. The resolution, or denouement, at the end is the tying up of loose ends. Everything gets resolved or finalized. The resolution sometimes involves a reversal of intention, whereby the protagonist's intended outcome is reversed, for better or worse. And this reversal often depends upon a recognition or discovery, which radically changes the protagonist's perspective. Note that there is a difference between this ideal structure and a story's actual structure. Sometimes, for example, the climax is delayed until the very end in order to create suspense or surprise, such as in The Lottery, a story many of you might be familiar with. Sometimes the crisis and climax come so close together we can't distinguish them. The structure of each story is unique, and there are endless variations, but you should be able to distinguish most of the elements of structure in any short story. In double plots, a secondary story, the subplot, parallels the main one, either as an analogy, the subplot is like a smaller scale version of the main plot, or as a contrast within the main story, like a comic subplot to an otherwise serious story. When writing about plot, your essay will usually be an analysis of the conflicts. Care must be taken to not merely summarize the plot of the story, but rather to develop a thesis based on the causes and effects. When writing about structure, one shows how the author's use of exposition, complications, climax, and so on create or support the main idea or thesis of the essay.